Hi there. I think I'm doing well. All right. All right. Looks like we've got Senate Bill 270, FNA, and we'll ask the prime sponsor to introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. For the record, I'm Senator Lou D'Alessandro. I represent District 20, Manchester Wards 2, 3, and 4, 10, 11, and 12. And it's a privilege to come before you today to introduce Senate Bill 270 FNA relative to appropriations to the Department of Transportation. It's quite a simple bill. We did this in the last session with Senate Bill 401. The bill appropriates $40 million in FY 2024 highway funds to the Department of Transportation for the distribution of aid to municipalities. Of this amount, $20 million will be distributed as bridge aid, $10 million based on bridge deck area, and $10 million based on population, and $20 million as additional appropriation A, highway block grants aids distributed under RSA 235:23, Roman 1. And I'd like to read to you from Inside Sources. New Hampshire is king of the road. Start your engines and get ready to roll. New Hampshire has been rated the best roads in the country at one of the lowest costs per mile. Monkey Creek, a professional finance website, looked at road conditions throughout the country using data from the United States Department of Transportation and other sources, and found New Hampshire is king of the road. Governor Chris Sununu was quick to take a victory lap, saying good government and smart investments are responsible. New Hampshire has made smart investments in our infrastructure, and we've returned over $100 million to cities and towns across the Granite State for roads and bridges, Sununu said. It's with this sense of smart fiscal management that we've paved the way to be ranked the #1 state for taxpayers' return on investment. So I think it's clear that the money that we have appropriated has found a wonderful use, and that everyone in the country recognizes that. So this bill would do the same thing that Senate Bill 401 did, only the distribution will be $20 million and $20 million rather than the $36 million and the $30 million. There's a lot of work left to be done, but indeed, if we're going to stay king of the road, the idea to remain on top of the heap is to fund properly so that the work can be done. And I have the distribution formula for Senate Bill 401, and I've asked for the distribution formula for Senate Bill 270 FN. I think it's being calculated by the Department of Transportation as we speak, Mr. Chairman. So with that, and in the good graces of time, I will end my testimony and welcome any queries that come from the kings and queens of the road that sit before me.
Questions from the committee members? I think that your testimony was such a good job that they don't have any questions.
Stimulating.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
DOT. Come on up. Andre.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm not going to claim to be a duke of the road or anything, but I do like that terminology, and we compliment Senator D'Alessandro for this bill. For the record, again, Andre Briere, Deputy Commissioner. I'm here with
Danielle Chandonnet, Director of Finance.
So we speak today in support of the bill We, like Senator D'Alessandro, are very proud of our efforts at New Hampshire DOT to keep our roads in a state of good repair and to use taxpayer dollars wisely and efficiently. The only caveat in our support is that as we look, and I will grant, especially earlier this year, the current account balance in the highway fund does lend itself to the idea that there are excess funds in that account, based on our updated highway fund surplus statement through this next biennium, through the end of 2025. I have to testify the fact that money is just not there with our current spending levels. By the end of the biennium, again, according to the latest highway fund surplus statement, we very likely will be in negative territory in the highway fund. Senator D'Alessandro, members of the committee are incredibly supportive and understand the long-term structural deficits of the highway fund that's due mostly to increasingly efficient CAFE standards and electric vehicles. We have a long-term issue with revenues into the highway fund, and that really bears itself out. The current surplus statement does not even include our average cost for winter maintenance in 2023 through 2025. It doesn't account for additional inflationary fuel costs. It doesn't account for additional inflationary material costs for our winter maintenance. So really, even though at the end of 2025, the highway fund is projected in the current governor's budget to be 13 million of balance, very likely that will be negative. And this is even after the $50 million infusion into the highway fund in the last budget. So when that 50 million was inserted into the highway fund, that was an acknowledgement of the fact that we would be in deficit in this biennium unless that happened. Again, we are four square in support of the notion of passing more funds through to communities, to our municipalities to keep the roads in good repair. We would urge consideration of a additional or alternate funding source than the highway fund, because that would come right out of our ability to perform our mission.
Thank you. Yes, Senator.
Thank you. So I was starting to read House Bill 2 right before we met, and it seemed like the governor was proposing a change to how the highway funds could be spent. And it looked to me like he was taking the supervision of the roads, the state police funding out of the highway funds. Is that true? And would that positively affect the highway fund?
Right. Well, and I won't speak specifically to a Department of Safety issue on that side, something they're working with the governor, but I will say that any fewer draws on the highway fund would be a positive when it comes to this spending. The other factor here is our TIFIA loan that we took out several years ago has really aided in the state of good repair. It's one of the reasons our roads are the best, and you feel a difference when you drive into New Hampshire. The principal on that TIFIA loan starts coming due in 2026, so right after this biennium, which is it's gonna be a significant hit to our ability to keep those roads in good repair. Something that's an ongoing conversation outside of the scope of this discussion, but that's also on the horizon.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Bradley.
Thank you. I'm glad that our friend from Manchester brought up Senate Bill 401 last year. That was my bill. And you actually co-sponsored it. Thank you very much. But it was a general fund appropriation of $66 million. I think, if I've heard your testimony correctly, you support
Absolutely.
the road and bridge money, but you want it coming out of the general fund.
That's correct.
Or some
Senator.
other.
That's correct, Senator. Yeah, we would. That's your purview, but we would be supportive of any other funding source.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, did you want to testify on anything, or just you were here to back him up?
I'm here to back him up.
All right.
Danielle
Very
just
good.
started with us a couple months ago, so this is among her first testimony, so we wanted to get her over here as well.
All right. While we're waiting for Catherine Heck to come up, I do want to give the committee a heads up.
Thank you, sir.
That starting 4:10 to 5:02, we are going to start hearing from the various departments. And so that's going to be Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, 1 o'clock to, somebody said 5:30. We're going to try to get you out by 4:30 on those days. But, you know, for your calendars, from April the 10th to May the 2nd, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. All right.
Well, good afternoon, Senator Gray and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Heck, and I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are here to voice strong support for Senate Bill 270, and to mimic what Senator D'Alessandro said and my predecessors, that Senate Bill 401 was transformative last year, the one-time use of surplus to distribute $36 million in bridge money and $30 million in additional highway funds, allowed many municipalities to not only continue their road plans as scheduled because of inflation, they were starting to scale back, but it allowed them to move forward some of their programs, such as repairing and maintaining some bridges to keep them off the red list, or go toward the 20% match that they need to come up with to repair a bridge under the red listed bridge program. I know that DOT has just released a new red listed bridge program where 65 communities have been identified that will be eligible for funding over the next 5 years. And for a community that's a small community like Westmoreland, they have a $3 million bridge program. They're a very small community, and that 80% that the state pays and the 20% match is still a huge lift, but monies like these go toward offsetting those local taxpayers' costs so that bridges like that can be repaired and maintained. I know that while this is slightly lower than last year, I think that the impact it will have will still be tremendous, because a mile of road costs between $1.2 and $1.5 million right now. So no matter what size community you are, that's the cost of the road to move forward. Our municipalities, I think you might have heard from Durham and North Conway. I believe they emailed you testimony to say how those funds were incredibly helpful in their communities last year to keep their transportation and their road projects moving forward, and even getting a little bit ahead of some of their goals that they were hoping to achieve. They were able to not only fully achieve them, but even move other projects higher on the list to keep our roads in good repair and condition. So I thank you for this opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up is Paul. Come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Waswich from Gallagher, Callan, and Gattro, representing the Aggregate Manufacturers Association. And we are in support of this legislation. It was supposed to, but maybe it didn't get drafted correctly, but it was to include the same format as last year's 401. It was to be out of the general fund. And I say, well, general fund, what do our contractors pay? And, you know, if this bill passes, we pay a bed tax, at least. That goes to the general fund. All the money that DOT lets out for contracts, we pay a bed tax, at least, on that. So we contribute to the general fund. We, being the highway fund, is a contributor to the general fund. So we would hope that that would be taken into consideration, and that these funds could be allocated to the municipalities. They've done a great job, and we urge your support. But there is a rationale. We do contribute. We hope some of that money, and not just us, contractors as engineers and unit, they pay at least the bed tax. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alex Katrubis. I'm here today to represent ACEC. We're an association of engineering firms. Based on my testimony at Senator Ricciardi's wastewater bill, Mr. Chairman, I know you like brevity, so I'll be about 90 seconds here. Engineering firms are in strong support of this legislation. We feel it will enable cities and towns to repair or replace roads and bridges that require attention due to safety and capacity issues. I just want to talk very briefly about a bridge and an intersection in the town of Hooksett. As you've already heard, House Bill 401 passed in 2022. That bill was part of a funding package that enabled Hooksett to reconfigure an intersection that will allow the safe flow of traffic through an area and design a new bridge that will be installed a few hundred feet east of the intersection crossing at Martins Ferry Road. And this is off of Hooksett Road on Route 3. Speed and safety issues will be addressed. The project will eliminate the need for an existing sidewalk. It will resolve issues with weight limits in the area and many other improvements. And according to the staff report that I just handed out on February 22nd, the Hooksett Town Council, Senate Bill 401 was really the difference to getting that project off the ground. And there's still work to be done. The town engineer estimates that it'll cost about $1 million to design and construct the project. If you don't pass a bill like this, they're going to have to float a bond, a warrant article. That's obviously going to have to be paid for with property taxes. The state obviously has a lot more levers that you can pull in terms of raising revenues. So anything that we can do to increase spending on infrastructure to keep the roads in the great condition they are, as Senator D'Alessandro, the engineers certainly support it. If we can avoid floating a bond and we can use this funding that we have, save money on interest, save money on the property tax. So we feel it's a smart investment for the legislature to spend this money. We thank Senator D'Alessandro for introducing the legislation. So that's all I have to say. Appreciate your attention.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Grant, just check and make sure don't nobody else signed up. Okay, with that, anybody with the last nickel? Okay, seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Senator Bradley moves we're going to executive session, seconded by Senator Ennis, I think. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are in executive session. If you pass that down to Deb, I'd appreciate it. First thing that I'm going to take up is Senate Bill 175, because the departments are here to answer some questions for Senator Bradley. So we have both HHS and labor. Who have we got? He says they're easy questions. Hit the button.
These are new to me, excuse
we'd
me.
like to hear you.
So good afternoon, I'm Danielle Albert. I'm with the New Hampshire Department of Labor. I'm the current Director of Workers' Compensation. I'm here today with General Counsel for the Department, Wesley Gardner. And we're happy to answer any questions that we may be able to about the proposed language in SB 175.
Senator Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you look at Senate Bill 175 on page 6, line 3, employer is defined for purposes of this section, which deals with policies for nursing mothers as 6 or more employees. The testimony that we heard from the sponsor was that the Department of Labor recommended that we retain that number of 6 because of consistency with other statutes, as opposed to some number that was somewhat higher to try to shield small businesses. I just wanted to ask that query of the department if that was the case, that is your recommendation.
Sure, and I can give a little bit of context as to where the number came from or how that number was reached. The Department of Labor held a seat on the Advisory Council for Lactation through the duration of the council, which, if my recollection serves, and it's going back some years, so please forgive me if it's a bit off, started around 2017. I served on that council in 2017 and 18 before it shifted to another staff member at the department. At the time that the council was putting together some of the language that I think is reflected here in SB 175, there was a lot of discussion about how do we define an employer and what should the qualifying number of employees be. And at the time, the number of 6 was reached because the council was looking at mirroring provisions in RSA 354 as it relates to Human Rights Commission's definitions for, I believe, for, if I recall, for continuity purposes and to have similarity or some continuity between the two. So at the time, that's how that number was reached. I think as far as the department's recommendation goes, 6 seems like a number, you know, certainly it's something that we would be able to enforce or that we would be able to carry forward if the language went forward. I don't know that we've been specifically asked, or at least not to my awareness, have we been specifically asked within the past 3 or 4 years, you know, would 6 or 12 make any sort of specific difference relative to that definition. But I do know that the number 6 came from the conversations that came, that were born out of the council crafting some of this language several years ago.
Further?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So in your opinion, and in the Department of Labor's opinion, at least, 6 is a rational based on what you've just said, but also in terms of the impact on small employers, that it's within the bound of reasonableness, I guess is how I'd put it.
It would seem to be, and it does mirror the way that the size of employers is defined in other areas where certain types of enforcement action, if we're looking at the HRC as the comparison, which was the comparison at the time that the language was drafted, is defining employers for the purposes of discrimination purposes or discrimination, you know, investigation or accommodation pieces at the state level.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Are there any other questions?
Anyone with additional questions? Senator Birdsall.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. In that same lane, where it says, page 6, line 8, it says undue hardship shall mean any action that requires significant difficulty or expense when considered in relation to factors such as size of business, financial resources, and nature. So just as let's say a Starbucks, where they do have well over 6 people working there, but it would be an undue hardship to try and put something in there that would be elected. Would that be considered? Would they be considered undue hardship for a facility like that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's actually an excellent question. So as the department understands this language and this, to give some disclosure, I don't believe this was language that the council, or at least during my tenure on the council, had a hand in putting together. But as this definition reads, it is somewhat broad, and it does give specific qualifiers, specifically certain factors that would be looked at, and it's the department's understanding that it would be within the department's discretion to balance those factors of size of the business, financial resources, nature and structure of the operations, and making a determination if a complaint were to come our way that there was non-compliance with the language in the statute, if it were to go into effect, that would constitute the undue hardship. I do think there could be some question as to, you know, you're looking at 6 or more employees working within the state. The language as currently drafted is not specifically, at least as we've read it or understood it, putting forward that it's per location. So if you do have an employer with multiple locations, our understanding is you're looking at that in its entirety, as opposed to per location. You know, so if there were 6 or more, but there were factors brought forward in the course of the department becoming involved through an investigative process about whether or not there were violations and the employer was bringing forward an undue hardship, you know, argument, we would be looking to balance those factors. But again, there's no specific definition of what, you know, of what constitutes a limit for financial resources, a certain threshold that's met. So it would be, we understand it to be within the department's discretion to balance those factors in making that determination.
Thank you. Additional questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the question and based on your answer, it's my perception from what you said that the department has discretion at this point in time. And as a result, it's not a problem.
Do you mean, so forgive me for requesting the clarification,
Sure.
not a problem for us to balance the factors?
Right.
We believe it's something that we could, implement and carry forward if the statute were to pass. It is, and just to be clear, it's our understanding that it would be within our discretion to balance those factors if it came forward to us, to determine whether or not the undue hardship exemption or provision would apply to a particular employer who's raising it as an issue or where it's come up as an issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any additional? Seeing none, thank you. Do you still have questions for Health and Human Services?
I don't.
Okay.
Sorry, John. But I will give a motion.
Well, before you give a motion, I did get a note that Senator Whitley would like to address us. Is that correct?
I think Senator Pearl has a question.
Senator Pearl, you had a question? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very
Department.
much.
That reminded me, I did actually need to tell you something. Good thing Grant's here. Yeah, yes. Just for the record, my name is Becky Whitley. I represent District 15. What I wanted to just point out is if you look on the bill as amended on page 3, line 15, we have a line in there that says, in consultation with the Doula Advisory Board. We took out that advisory board with the amendment we did in HHS, so that's just a technical fix.
All right, so what you're suggesting is, which exact words would you,
So you just need to say,
in consultation with?
get rid of the clause that starts with in consultation with. Line 15, excuse me. So page 3, line 15, we do not need the clause starting in consultation with the Doula Advisory Board because we got rid of that in the bill.
LBA's got that?
If I may.
And a question.
Okay.
Certainly.
So my understanding for certification of doulas, it would only be necessary if a doula is accepting Medicaid.
Correct.
So if a doula is not, has no Medicaid clients, that person would not need certification. Is that correct?
Correct, Senator Bradley. That was a big topic of conversation. We wanted to be respectful of the doula community. HHS agreed, the drafters agreed, the doula community agreed that if a doula does not want to take Medicaid, then they would not need to be certified for this. The only reason why we actually had to add the certification is Director Littman said that you can't bill Medicaid unless you have that certification from OPLC. So that's the only reason why we added. So just to be very clear, again, the certification is only required for Medicaid billing. It's not required for the practice of doula.
May I follow up on his question?
Absolutely.
So where in here, I'm looking on page 2.
Yeah.
And it's referring to doula services in RSA 310A 222.
Yep.
I don't have a 222. It stops at 221 when I look up the RSAs.
There might be some technical fixes that are probably necessary from our HHS amendment. But if you look at, there's another, unfortunately, the way that the bill was organized, the requirement to add the doula coverage is in the beginning of the bill, but then the OPLC certification is later in the bill.
So maybe that's where they're establishing
Yep.
322. Where in the beginning of the bill would I find that?
So if you look at starting page 7, line 30 is where we get into the certification. And that's where on line 32, we say, for the purposes of Medicaid billing. That's how they essentially, OPLC is only to establish this doula certification for the purposes of billing.
And that's why we don't have a 222, because it's being added right here. All right, now I'm finding it. I didn't flip quite far enough.
No, no problem.
But we're certain, 100% certain, and OPLC is in agreement that this is not going to regulate only doulas that require certification, only doulas that are looking for Medicaid coverage.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to OPLC since, but we did work with them on the drafting of this bill, and we were very clear that it's only for the purposes of Medicaid billing. And then I don't know if someone from HHS is here also, but again, it was very clear that this is only for the purposes of Medicaid billing.
But you haven't had a conversation with them in the last month, 2 weeks.
In the last, I mean, were they at the hearing?
I can tell you that
Yeah.
in a conversation that I had with them, this came up because we were talking about other certifications, and I didn't get a sense of comfort that they agreed with that position.
Well, here's the thing, though. It's a statutory interpretation question, and I want to be very clear, as I was on the floor,
Yes.
that the intent of the statute is only, in the drafting the statute, is only for the purposes that we discussed. And if you look at that requirement on line 32, OPLC has not been given, and they would have to be given the authority to create a certification process outside of the Medicaid system, and they haven't. We've only given them the authority to do the certification process for the purposes of Medicaid billing. So that's pretty clear to me in statutory interpretation, like by the plain language, and also you're on the record that that was the intent of the drafter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Important clarification, because it really was important to the doula community.
Yes.
Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. So if a doula wants to be reimbursed by commercial insurance, there's no certification required? Only for Medicaid?
That I don't know. I don't know whether it's even covered, honestly, by private insurance. That's sort of outside my expertise. Apologize about that.
Thanks.
There are, and maybe Senator Pearl knows this more, there are, in their practice area, they do get different certifications, but we're just talking about a state certification in this instance.
For full disclosure, my wife is a doula. That's why I'm asking these questions, because I get these questions at home and I couldn't answer them. So now I'm trying to get the info to answer them.
All right, additional questions for Senator Whitley? Seeing none, Senator Bradley. What, too quick, huh?
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the effective dates for Section 10, which is the protection for nursing mothers and also the penalties. And this goes beyond the next biennium. This is trying to bind a future legislature. We don't typically do that. It seems not necessarily a good idea. I wonder if you could speak about that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I will say that is something, this was those effective dates were added in an amendment we did in DHHS, but I don't believe we really discussed it at length. There were a lot of other issues. So, I mean, I am amenable to making the effective date something that works for folks. I think when we were looking at that workplace protections section, we wanted to adequately balance what was good for working moms and what was good for businesses. But I would be amenable to, making that effective date of that section back to 2024.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So as you were working with the stakeholders, did you hear from like the BIA that they thought it was important to push it back 2.5 years?
I didn't hear
3
that.
years?
No.
So we didn't hear that from the business community that it needed to be so far out in the future.
I did not hear that.
Thank you.
Grant just gave me a sheet of paper. It comes from the fiscal note, or from HHS, and it says section 4, 11, and 15 appear to have technical defect where the appropriation for SFY 2024 would predate the effective date of July the 1st, 2024. These sections need to be effective July the 1st, 2023.
So your section 4, page 2.
what we're going to do is we're going to hold this until next week, and the department, I'm guessing, is the right one to do this, and square it all away and get back to us. Okay? Senator Bradley.
Yeah, if I can answer Senator Rosenwald's consideration. So, Section 10 is not a financial consideration. It's a change of law that offers the protections for lactation and nursing mothers. I don't think there is a question of binding a future legislature. We're changing the law to offer that protection. But the Health and Human Services Committee made the effective date with Senator Whitley's okay as a compromise to make sure that businesses had the opportunity to make any adjustments necessary to comply with the effective date. So I think your concern of binding a future legislature is not, it's just not the case here.
Well, we're not in, are we in executive session?
Yeah.
So I can ask. Did the committee hear from the business community that they needed until July 1st of 2025 to change their policies, that they needed over 2 years?
I don't recall, without looking at the hearing report, that there was actually testimony offered by the business community. I think it was our concern, and this same bill died in the House a year ago, so we just wanted, I think, even though the Senate voted for it, I believe unanimously, we wanted to make sure, and it's a compromise that the sponsor was good with, we were good with, it seems to make sense. But, you know, for especially, I think the concern of some was that when you go as low as a business with 6 or more employees, you're getting into some pretty small businesses. So a bit of time to give them the opportunity to able to be in compliance is appropriate.
If I
Okay,
may,
since Senator Rosenwald is a co-sponsor, you get to fix this one and bring it back on next week. Amen.
just so I know, we're gonna fix that portion about the dual advisory board, but I didn't catch I'm sorry,
The
the
date.
issue.
Well, if I might, isn't this potentially a pass and table anyway? And if it's gonna go into the budget, we could do it at that point in time?
Well, we could, but I guess it's a question for all of us. Do we want to delay the work until May when we're really straight out? Or do we want to get the bills into the shape that they can just be put on the table while we can still breathe? Just my
Okay.
7 terms on finance says,
I don't see that delaying this a week is going to do us any harm.
right, we can fix
And-
the appropriation
And
language and
I have
then,
volunteered Senator Rosenwald
Right.
to do it.
and I'm happy
sure
to
she'll
do
an
it, and we
excellent
can
job.
buff it into shape, lay it on the table, and then just pick it up and put it in House Bill 2.
Everybody say amen, amen. Okay.
Senator Gregg, and the department will get the fiscal note to us by next Tuesday. Because we don't have any fiscal note right now.
Okay,
Can I say one thing about that?
absolutely, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that opportunity. So just in terms of the appropriations that we put in the bill, they do come directly from the department. So I know you all are waiting for the fiscal note, but the appropriations that we have in there came directly from the department. Yeah.
Use the language about when they are or they're lapsing.
We're gonna let you work on it. All right, moving on.
Thank you.
So that people who are here that don't want to stay I am not going to do anything with Senate Bill 115. I'm also not going to do anything today on Senate Bill 122. Likewise with Senate Bill 231, those will all be taken up next time. Senate Bill 104, Senate Bill 256, and Senate Bill 260, again, will be held for this week and taken up next week. So if that eases anybody's mind, now we're going to start back through the list. And the first one at the top of the list was one of our bills, 169 FN. And you have an amendment, okay?
Should I move on to pass?
We certainly want the ought to pass motion first, and then we can take the motion for the amendment. Okay, so Senator Rosenwald moves ought to pass on Senate Bill 169 FNA. And do I have a second? Okay. All right, and Senator Rosenwald also moves amendment 2023-0687S.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the public hearing, the question was raised about whether there would be any
We
local.
need a second first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, we got a second now.
Okay, thank you. The question was raised of whether there would be any local tax impacts from building out this water infrastructure. And the answer we got back was there would potentially be two, local property taxes and the utility tax. I hope that we're in agreement that ratepayers in towns that are currently serviced by a water company that might build out this infrastructure should not have to pay for the communities that end up getting the water. So, for example, if Pennachuck were going to do this project and they were going to run their pipes through Merrimack and Litchfield to get to Londonderry, we wouldn't expect the ratepayers in those towns to be adversely affected. So this amendment just adds a sentence starting on line 9 that no public utility ratepayer shall be adversely affected by any direct or indirect cost to bring drinking water to any community through any project funded by this appropriation. So if there were other costs down the road with other appropriations, we could revisit it, but this would make sure that while it's important to build this infrastructure and get clean drinking water in Londonderry and maybe Wyndham and some other towns, that current ratepayers of non-municipal systems are not going to be adversely affected by that. So that's all this amendment does. I would say also that it has been run through Environmental Services, and Commissioner Scott's okay with it. It's gone through the Department of Energy, and it's gone through Senator Carson, and she's okay with it.
Further discussion? Senator Bradley.
So if I can ask the LBA this question, does this in any way change how the infrastructure is assessed a property tax in whether it's the community, say of Londonderry, that's getting the water or the communities it's passing through?
Senator, I don't know the answer to that question. That would probably be a question we'd have to ask DRA, where they do some of that work with the communities.
we have other communities, like I sit on the city council in Rochester, and we have land up in Farmington, and certainly piping systems bring the water from Farmington down into Rochester. We pay for all of that and are taxed on the land and, you know, other things. So, you know, there is precedence out there. We just need to get you the chapter and verse so that, you know, you can understand it, I think.
Well, I want to make sure that we're not setting a new precedent here by taking away the property taxes that would be paid to the community that has the infrastructure in it. Because I think when I asked this question at the hearing, you answered that the current law is that the infrastructure is subject to a property tax.
Yes, that's correct. I reached out to DRA and it is subject to local property tax and utility property tax.
And I just want to make sure that if we adopt this amendment, it hasn't changed that.
Senator Rosenwald.
I had a lot of discussions with the Pennachuck people and Bill Erdinger.
And they think they should not be subject to the property tax, and that changes the dynamic of how we tax every other utility in the state potentially.
This is only about this particular appropriation. The way this is drafted. So what they kept saying to me was the PUC would never allow Pennachuck to recover costs from Nashua or Hudson ratepayers. Thank you. For the build-out of infrastructure to get to Londonderry. So they believe it doesn't change that, but it's specific only to a project funded by this appropriation.
Okay.
Well, it would seem that then you are changing what is current practice and current law. And
Every time it comes up again, it's gonna be written this way, right? And it will change it.
Right now, does LBA understand what Senator Bradley is asking, and can they get us an answer that distributed to the committee? And if we take action on this today, we can distribute it before we vote on the floor.
I think we understand what the concern is, and again, I think we need to reach out to DRA to confirm what impact this language might have, if it is specific to just what Senator Rosenwald has suggested, or if there's the potential that it could broaden to other things in the future. So the answer, I think, is yes, we can get you something.
So, and I do believe that the infrastructure is subject to tax because it will be owned by one community, you know, on the land or in the land of the other community. That's the existing law. That's, you know, things that at least I think I'm familiar with. And if anybody wants to hold on this one till we get the answer, or? I think we should.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna hold on this
we're
one.
holding on doulas, we might as well hold on this.
Hold on to those pipes.
And everybody's rescinding their motions.
Yes.
And we're going on to Senate Bill 85.
I move on to pass.
I second.
There's an amendment.
We have an ought to pass motion on Senate Bill 85. And we have a second. Senator Innes, seconded by Senator Bradley. TP. And Senator Innes, I guess, also moves, or Senator Bradley, this is Senator Bradley's amendment. So-
Yes.
So we'll have Senator Bradley, if he's willing, Move amendment 2023-077-0700S.
I move that, and the changes are Grant picked up after HHS looked at this bill, that we should have fixed the quorum requirements, and we removed one of the sections that deals with how the appointment should be made.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay. Bradley, seconded by Senator Innes. 0700S. Further discussion? Right.
I seconded.
The ought to pass, the first motion was Innes and Bradley, and the amendment was Bradley and Innes. Okay, discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment 0700S, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It is unanimous. 7-0. Discussion on the bill as amended. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. I was reading the fiscal note that we got a little while ago,
Yep.
and it says the insurance department brings up a potential of higher costs that the state could be on the hook for marketplace plans. And so my question is, isn't mental health treatment one of the 10 essential health benefits? So it would not be subject to that provision in the Affordable Care Act that states would have to pay for other benefits beyond the 10 essential ones.
So continue in that vein of being very helpful. I don't know the answer. The Department of Insurance provided that comment, so we just put it in the fiscal note. You know, they raised it as a concern. If they didn't follow that procedure that's mentioned there, that the potential exists where there may be some increased costs the state might be bound to pick up. But they give no additional information.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't make me not want to vote for the bill anymore, but I just wonder why the insurance department would say that.
Well, the purpose of the bill in this regard is to make sure that the same treatment for mental health that we currently have for substance abuse is the same in terms of prior authorizations. And there's been a lot of discussion over the years since we really started this process 7 or 8 years ago about that. As I recall, there was, and normally when you start debating prior authorizations, you have every insurance carrier coming in, you know, wanting to make sure they have as many prior authorizations as possible. This was something that the advocates of the bill, which was New Futures, asked me to sponsor, made sure to treat mental health the same as substance abuse. And as I recall, and you can look at the hearing report, but I don't think there was any opposition.
I don't know why there would be. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just think it's strange that they raise this potential Affordable Care Act issue, which doesn't seem
Well, you're right.
like it's
I mean,
relevant.
it goes back a long ways to the Wellstone Act of parity.
Of parity.
But also the 10 essential benefits require
I think it's
parity.
fine.
So,
I can't imagine that the state would be having to pay for that.
don't believe so. But
Okay, we have a motion of ought to pass as amended. Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. And ought to pass came from Senator Innes, Senator Bradley. The amendment came from Bradley, Innes, and then ought to pass as amended, just goes back to the original people. Okay? I guess Senator Rosenwald, since she was,
Okay.
okay, the next one I've got is 108.
Move on to pass.
Second.
To pass was Senator Innes, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. On 108, is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair. Senator Ennis was faster than I was, so I'll give him this one. This bill came through ED&A and
You're welcome to.
that's all
Why don't
right.
you take it out?
And
That can be arranged.
we heard some very compelling testimony that where the public defender program is required, that we have that representation for people, that they were struggling with their insurance rates and that their participation within the state insurance program would allow them to retain their employees much better. They have a lot of young public defenders that come in there, and it's sort of a starting place for many folks in their career. And their insurance needs can be pretty high when especially if they're having young families. And so it was represented to the committee that this was a good idea, and I think it's, as you can see, the fiscal note isn't exorbitant, and I think it's a good thing for this committee to pass.
All right, further discussion?
Sorry to preempt you.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And motion is unanimous, and Senator Pearl?
I will take it out happily.
Just
Unless
take it out.
Senator Ennis wants it.
Nope, nope. Next one on my list is Senate Bill 127.
Does anyone want this? I'll move on to pass.
I did have a question.
Are we?
Rosenwald did it. Yeah.
Ought to pass was made by Senator Ennis, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Senator Rosenwald has a question.
I did. So, in sections 3 and 4, the fiscal note says the change will have no fiscal impact because it doesn't affect the number of people eligible or the amount that's paid for the services. But it seems like there are going to be more people getting paid for the services because it adds new people who are eligible to be paid. So I guess I don't really understand why there might not be a fiscal impact.
I would need to defer to the agency on that. This is what they provided back to us yesterday.
Okay.
Well, since this one isn't going to be a moving table, if the department does want to talk to us, I certainly will be willing to listen.
Chairman Gray, members of the committee, in addressing Senator Rosenwald's question, the thought that the department had in putting together the de minimis fiscal impact or none is because the individuals who would be seeking those services would be deemed eligible both financially and clinically for those services. This is a workforce capacity issue of making sure that we have the supply of people out there to be able to provide those personal care services. You may recall that within the last 2 legislative sessions, you expanded it also to family members who working in that capacity as well. So we think this is a good idea, both from a policy standpoint, but most importantly from a fiscal standpoint, that it's pretty much something that would be budgeted for in any event. So this would not be any duplication of cost.
Additional questions? Seeing none, we have an ought to pass motion. All those in favor of ought to pass, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It is unanimous. And Senator Birdsall, would you like to do this one?
Sure. She's excited.
All right. Next one on my list is 152. Relative to New Hampshire Workforce Training Program.
Marine trades.
Ought to pass by Senator D, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. I don't have any amendments or anything. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senator D, this one's yours. And, yep, 178.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we refer this bill, which is a
Uh,
I'd like to discuss that as a motion. If there's a second. Sorry. I'd like to move that we re-refer this bill and explain why.
And I would second that motion.
So the motion made by Senator Rosenwald, seconded by Senator D'Alessandro, is to refer.
Well, so here's my thinking.
Yep.
As we know, these formulas are incredibly expensive. They're subject to a spend down by Medicaid. In November, the department asked CMS, is this bill possible? Can we exempt enteral formulas from the spend down? The week before last, we heard back from CMS saying, no, you can't. We don't know why. The department is trying to see how else they might approach the same issue of cost in a different way. I've also initiated discussions with our federal delegation to see why and what could be done about it. I don't think it's going to be a quick fix, but if it were, we could deal with it in House Bill 2. But I think our other option maybe is to pass it and table it. But it just seemed like I don't want to not be transparent. CMS said, no, you can't do this.
Comments from the department?
Yes.
He was hiding back there. I can see him though.
Good afternoon. For the record, Henry Lippman, the Medicaid Director. I think the issue boils down for CMS that spend down means you have to incur the cost, and that even though it's a very high cost item, that there wasn't flexibility to adjust the formula to do so. What I do, one of the people that was presenting at the hearing in HHS, I have a meeting with Thursday to explore what other ways to address this. I understand the concern and the issue, and the testimony and the impact on the family is pretty compelling, and want to try to find if there's a solution, but unfortunately this is not going to work. So we're going to look for something else, and it I can't promise today what that is, but I think that.
So re-refer doesn't have any impact on you, any negative impact on you?
No, I think we really want to have something that we know would be helpful.
Further questions from the committee? Senator Herzog.
Just a comment. I think a re-refer would be better, because if we go ahead and table at the end of the session, it dies, and then we have to put in another bill. At least this would be ready to go if we do get a recommendation.
Well, we look at the budget. I mean,
right.
If we get a quick fix.
Well, re-refer is the motion in front of us. Is there additional questions? All those in favor of re-refer, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none. And since Senator Rosenwald made that motion, she gets this one.
Okay. Be careful what you wish for. No, I
only thing we can do with it.
Next bill is 189.
I'll move on to pass.
Senator Ennis moves, ought to pass.
Sorry, I was just catching up.
And Senator Pearl seconds it. Discussion. Okay, seeing none. We have a motion of ought to pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 5-2,
I'll take that out.
and Senator Ennis will take it out. Senator Ennis. 197.
Ah, yes. I'll move on to pass.
Senator Ennis moves ought to pass. I'll second it. Relative to the operation and regulation of certain business entities within the state. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There's nobody opposed. I haven't taken one out yet, so I want to spread the wealth here.
All right. That'll be fun.
202.
Oh, yes. I'll move on to pass.
Senator Ennis moves ought to pass. Senator Rosenwald seconds. This one is relative to establishing a home ownership innovation fund in New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And Senator Ennis,
Yes,
take
sir.
this one out.
You got it.
233.
I'll second that.
Senator Rosenwald, seconded by Senator Ennis. Reestablish the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, farmers market nutrition program. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Senator Birdsall. The next one is 234. P. Senator Rosenwald, seconded by Senator D'Alessandro. And this one is directing the Department of Health and Human Services to develop public awareness campaign on brain health, etc. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Senator D. You get this one. And the last two on the list are holds.
Yep.
Okay, so you've heard the announcement about the start of the budget process with the departments coming in. That's going to eat up the time. Certainly, we're going to start those meetings at 1, depending on how many questions you guys have. Depends on how long we have to stay. And so I'll leave that up to you. But I like to try to be out of Concord on a lot of these days by 4:30. But, you know, I can't control it. You will.
All
Is there any other business to come before us in the executive session?
Motion to adjourn?
Well, we got to have a motion to come out of executive.
Oh, that too.
Senator D'Alessandro
Thank
moves
you.
to come out of the second executive session.
Oh.
Senator Ennis seconds.
He does.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Our
Motion to
business of
adjourn.
the day being completed, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Senator. Did you see that? Yeah.
And for anybody who's counting, Deb told me there's 34 bills still in the committees that, as of this morning.